Hello, my name is Audrie Gordon, and I'd like to welcome you to day 21 of the Dataverse Advent Calendar. Today, we're going to step back and take a closer look at Dataflows and get a better understanding of when and why you might use it. I'm also going to share a couple of surprising opportunities you have when working with Dataflows. First, I want you to understand kind of what the objective here. What we have done is we've inserted Dataflow into the context of Dataverse so that you're not limited to the data in Dataverse. You can actually bring in data from other relevant data sources that you currently use. Like yesterday, we brought in data from SharePoint, which might be considered in this diagram a software as a service. You also saw how it was easy to bring in data from Excel or from a CSV file. But you can do that from many different sources. And once you connect to these sources with Dataflow's help, right, you'll end up in Power Query. In Power Query, those of you that have been using Power Query for years, you're going to feel right at home with this, especially our Power BI users that have been using Power Query for many, many moons. This is where you can literally bring in the data as is, or more importantly, be able to transform it so that it aligns to what you plan to do with it based on where it's going. Today, I'm going to focus on this data ending up in Dataverse, but you definitely have other options. You can get that data into Azure Data Lake storage as well. And as we talk about Azure Synapse Link, you'll see even other opportunities to create your own query tables and use them in Power BI. We're going to get to that later on, probably in a couple of days. But for now, we're going to focus on bringing in the data from wherever you want to bring it into Dataverse. Things to keep in mind is that you have all of these connectors available to you that you can use. And this scroll bar does scroll. We'll go look at it. There's a lot of options for where you can bring data in. And so Microsoft is definitely not thinking of only itself because it knows that people use a variety of different data sources. So you'll see many different data sources in here. And I'm actually going to show you two surprising options today, which relate to not just tabular data that might be in tables somewhere, but also thinking of data that might be available through a REST API. Okay, so now we're in Dataverse, and I've clicked on Dataflows. And this was the one that we did yesterday. We actually brought in a few columns from a table from SharePoint. That worked out really well. We ended up with a table called Demo Tables, right? Just so that we could kind of see, what does this feel like? Today, I'm going to look at this a lot closer. So we're going to go to Dataflows, and we're going to create a new one. If you have none, there'll be a button in the middle to create, but you can still use this one that I'm pointing here to. Notice, we're not going to talk about this today, but notice at the top you also have new link to Data Lake. All right, lot to talk about there. I'll put some notes in the description. So for today, I'm going to name this data flow. Let's go ahead and get that whole SharePoint list again, right? I'm just going to call this SharePoint import, right? And basically what we're going to do is we're going to import a list from SharePoint. It's the same list we imported yesterday. I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the Power Query options, all right? So if I choose SharePoint Online List, now I can paste the name of that list here. Okay, I've gone ahead and opened the SharePoint site so you can see it. And basically, we're going to import this list, which is a list of apartments. All right. Now, it's something I want to point out here. This is a typical confusion for new SharePoint users, by the way, is that sometimes when you create columns, especially if you create them using a system account or a shell or script or something, they might not be named what they say they're named. So if you go into list settings and you pick on one of these lists, at the end, you see the internal name of the SharePoint column. Notice that this is field-3 and not host ID. So this is the kind of thing that I would want to transform, because I don't want my field headers to say field-3, which is what their internal name is, right? So Power Query will pick that name up, all right? So don't be surprised if you see column headers kind of changing in Power Query than what you saw in SharePoint, because Power Query is using the internal name and not the display name, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL just like we did yesterday. And to get an idea of what the format should be, just look at the example that's pasted there. That's kind of like it's grayed out, it's right there. And I'm just going to paste. All right. Now, I am already signed in, but if you have to sign in, you just click sign in and sign in. All right. And then I'm going to do next. In order to get this data, this user would have to have rights to the data, of course. And what data they can bring in is only the data they have rights to. Okay, so point given. All right, so I'm going to look for that list. Here it is. And we've done this yesterday. Basically, this first screen is just to make sure you have the right thing, right? You just kind of scroll around, see if, oh, that's what I meant to pick. And you can pick multiple things. You don't have to just pick one. And now I'm going to click transform. And this is what I want to talk a little bit more about today than I did yesterday. This is where we get the power of Power Query, okay? Power Query has been around for a long time, but it makes data transformation really easy. And so what do I mean by transformation? Kind of all this stuff you see up here, right? What columns you're going to use, what rows, how you want to sort it. Do you want to break things up? Do you want to set a data type? This down. You can see the different data types that there are that you can use, and you want to use those data types when you're transforming your data so that when it gets where it's going, it's the right data type. And we'll even have an opportunity to map it when we get ready to bring it into Dataverse, all right? But first, we're just making sure we have the data we want. So a lot of times what I'll do is select the columns that I want, right? Because there's always more columns here than I need, always, all right? And it's just because you have all the system columns and I don't know, somebody's note column that you don't want to bring over. So I'm just going to hold down my Control T and click the header of each column that I want. So I do want title. The next thing I want is field 2. Field 3, which was host ID, remember? Okay, so basically these field titles are wrong, but I can look at the data and tell, is that what I want to bring in? And that's kind of what I want to bring in. So I make sure I hold down the Control key until I have everything that I want. I don't think I want this one. All right, and then what I do is I do remove other columns. You could do it the other way around too. You could select what you don't want and then remove them. But I like to kind of just, you can just click on a column and remove it. But I like to do it all at one shot just because it saves me a little bit of time and because some data sources have a lot of data. All right, I'm going to use this title field. I think they're unique. As my ID column, just in case I want to go back to SharePoint and double check something. But now this name right here is actually the apartment name. So this is the, I guess I'll call it the dwelling name, because it could be a house. Sometimes it's an apartment, sometimes it's a house, sometimes it's a villa. And basically I'm transforming right now. Okay, I'm going to call this host owners, because yesterday we realized that owners might get confused with Dataverse record owners. This is my neighborhood here. And this is the dwelling type. This one. Now, because I'm doing this, it'll come into Dataverse with these headings and not the headings that SharePoint sent back, right? And this is minimum nights. So in order to reserve it, you have to have a minimum of nights in some cases. And then this is, I'm going to call this availability. So I've just kind of changed what I want there, right? Now, another thing I can do while I'm transforming is I can filter things. Like say I don't want this neighborhood, Campo di Marte. I can drop this down and just remove that from the records, and now those records won't come in. All right. So I'm going to put it, yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. So I removed Campo de Marte. Somebody remember that, okay? Because we're going to test this later and we're going to have less records because we've removed a neighborhood. All right. You have a dwelling type, you have a price. Now, all of these are all texts. And so they say ABC123, which means they're alphanumeric. But price, I want that to be currency. So I'll click on that and I'll say currency. So now the price is currency. Minimum nights, I don't want that to be text. What if I want to add that? So it's important to get number functions correct, especially if you're planning to add them, like do some type of formula. You need to make sure they're in there as numbers and not as text, right? So I'm going to give that a whole number because we don't have half a night. You're either there or you're not. And then the availability. And if I wanted to, for instance, I could remove what was reserved, but I'm going to take it all, okay? Each of these transformations is stored over here so that I can backtrack whenever I want just by removing the last one and starting over, right? All right, so let's hit next. And now it starts to say, oh, what do you want to do with this in Dataverse? Well, I want a brand new table. I want it named the same thing it was named in SharePoint, and I want the display name to be the same name, okay? Now, I'll let it auto-generate the table name column. That's fine. And then I have to map all of this, right? So my availability is text, and what I'm mapping is data types, right? Dwelling is text, dwelling type is text, host owners is text, minimum nights is whole number, neighborhood is text, price is text, and title is text. So basically what you've already done, you're just kind of checking it here. Okay? And then I'm going to do next. And now I make that decision. Do I want this just today? Or do I want to create a synchronization situation? I'm just going to do a manual refresh. And I will let the Dataflow owner, who is myself in this case, know if there's a failure. And then I click publish. It published, and this can take, a varied amount of time depending on a lot of factors. And then it's in the process of refreshing right now. Now I didn't set up a next refresh, so this will move over to last as soon as it's done, and then we won't see a next unless we run it again. And we can save this data flow and keep it whenever we want to bring that table back in again. All right. And so these are things that you can hold on to and reuse. I like that. So I'm just going to wait for this circle to be stopped spinning, and I'll be right back. Done. We got a green check mark, which again means success. In some cases, you'll see a red check mark. In that case, click on it and you'll get more details around what's wrong. Okay, so keep that in mind. I will share a link to some troubleshooting tips as well online. Okay, so let's go find our table that we got here. We should have a new RB, and there it is. There's our new table. And now we have more data than we did yesterday because we actually took the time to pull in all those columns. So I'm going to edit my default view again. And this time it's going to look a little different because I did it a little bit different. Minimum nights. Take this out. Minimum nights. You got to drag so that you see that purple triangle and then let go. Price. And you'll notice price is actually in currency because we transformed it into currency. Then I'm going to sort by dwelling name and save and publish. All right, so this time we brought much more than we did yesterday, and we actually did a lot more transformations. Those internal names of field 1, 2, 3, and 4 are completely gone from Dataverse because we transformed the data first. So I like testing in model-driven apps, but I use up model-driven apps quite a bit. All right, so there we are. You can see this is 1 to 50 of 400 and 476. Now, in here, there's 4,997. But remember, we filtered and we removed Campo de Marte, right? So if you remove that on SharePoint, you end up with 4,476, which is what we have in Dataverse. We don't have that brought in, okay? So you have that option as well. Okay, so that was all great and good, easy to understand. And you probably can figure out that you can bring just about any type of table into Dataflow. All right, I'm going to show you two little surprises, and this is just, I'm always impressed at what we can do that we don't even know we can do. Did you know that you can also use Dataflows for any REST API GET command? So I'm going to give you an example. So I'm actually working in a student database, and I want to give my students a form that they will fill out. These are high school students, and they're going to select the university of choice that they want to apply for next year. Now, I want to put that on my form as a lookup, right? So that they can just, search for the university and then show it on the form. This is not something I would use an option set or a choice list for, because the list of universities in the United States is way too long. So I'd rather set this up as kind of a lookup that they can use. So do I want to type every single university in the United States? No, I don't. There is a REST API that will give me them by country. So I can use that as a Dataflow query. So all I'm going to do is go into here and go into Web API, choose that, and paste in the GET command. Now this one is free. There's no key needed. It's by Hippo Labs. And basically you do a search by country, and then you put your country name in there. If your country, like mine, has 2 words in it, then you have to use %20 between the words for the space, all right? You don't need to be signed in as anything, because this will work on any account. And then I can hit next. Now, in my GET command, I have a filter, so I don't need to do any more filtering, but we will do a little bit of transformation on this. Okay, now that we're in there, we have those universities. I usually start by getting rid of the columns I don't need. So I don't need this column, or I can just, like I did before. So let's open up the web pages first so that we can get that record of, so these are the URLs of the web pages. That's great. So I will keep that. I noticed that state has a lot of null values. And when you're dealing with a REST API, you're kind of dealing with the quality of the REST API. There's nothing you can do about it. You could remove blanks from here. But I'm not going to, because I'm worried that I will now reduce my drop down to smaller than it needs to be. So since they kind of know what state they're in, I'm not going to worry about keeping this column at all. So goodbye column. The domains, I think, are the education domains, and they're already in the web page. So I'm going to delete that column as well. I don't even need country, because I'm only showing American, US universities. And so now I basically have it down to what I want. The name column is going to be my key column, and this is important. This is the column I will use in lookups when people are looking up these schools. All right, so then I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to add this to a brand new table. I don't want it to be called query, so I'm going to call this student university. And I'm always university, and then the primary key is going to be name, because that's what's going to show up when they look up to this table. And I'll make sure that that's displayed as text, and web pages are displayed as text. And then we'll do next. And then now, because this is a REST API, I might plan to refresh this, because the REST API is constantly going to be updated as universities are added or subtracted. So I might go ahead and set this up to refresh every 3 months. All right, we don't have to do this very often, every 3 months, and off-peak hours are best. and let me know if the refresh fails, right? So this is something I would do for REST APIs or direct queries. And then I'm going to press publish, and now it's going to start. Now I'm going to put the video on pause while this publishes and refreshes, and I'll be right back. Okay, we're all done and we're successfully published and everything. I just forgot to do something. So this is an opportunity for me to show you how to edit your data flows. So I can go in here and just on Student Universities choose edit. What I forgot to do was to check for duplicates. Sometimes that happens. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to take this name column and I'm going to sort it A to Z. And I'm going to find that I don't want these two at the beginning. So I'm going to remove these first two. So I'm going to remove top two rows. And then I'm going to select the whole thing. You can see right there that there's duplicates, right? I'm going to select the column and then I'm going to say on the rows, I'm going to say remove duplicates. And this is an important transformation to make sure I don't have duplicates in my lookup, all right? And if you notice, it's nicely sorted and there are no duplicates, all right? So I forgot to do that, but that's great. I got to show you how you can go back and change, right? You can go back and revise your queries, all right? And I can check this delete rows that no longer exist. That'll make sure that those duplicates actually get deleted, and I'm going to press publish. And you'll notice it kicks off a new publish. All right, so I'll be right back as soon as it's done publishing and refreshing. Okay, it's all done and it's finished. So let's go check and see if we have a table. Student University, and there we go. So it worked out just fine. There we have all of our university alphabetized as suggested. Again, if you want to look up to this, say from another table, create a lookup column, and then the lookup will focus on this name. So one last thing I want to share with you, and that is on the Learn page, you'll notice you can also use Dataflows with OData expressions. So if we go back to Dataflows and I just do one last one, those of you that are interested in Northwind, I've mentioned it a few times because I use it quite a bit for demos. There is an OData category where you can paste the Northwind OData request in there and pull in all the tables for Northwind traders. And this is the raw, so you should use the Power Apps solution, but you can use OData to call in these tables if you want to do it yourself in Scratch. You just want to bring in all the data and make your own solutions. You can do that as well. So OData, Web API, tables, data sources, Excel, CSV. Your imagination is the limits that you have. And that's all I wanted to cover in day 21 of the Dataverse Advent Calendar. I hope you will enjoy using Dataflow to do your own data import, synchronizations, and transformations. I enjoyed talking to you today, and I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow for day 22 of the Dataverse Advent Calendar. Happy holidays!